My family's 50-year secret finally exposed. The truth about my real father will shock you. I always knew something was off about my family. There were whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, old photographs hastily hidden when I got too curious, and a strange sadness in my mother's eyes whenever I asked about my father's past. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered last month when I was cleaning out my recently deceased grandmother's attic. My name is Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. I grew up believing that my father, Robert Mitchell, was a hardworking accountant who met my mother, Elizabeth, at a church social in 1987. They married quickly. I was born 9 months later, and we lived what seemed like a perfectly normal suburban life. Dad was quiet, methodical, always home for dinner, and never spoke much about his childhood or family. When I asked, he'd simply say his parents died young, and he preferred to focus on the future, not the past. But as I grew older, inconsistencies began to pile up. Why did we never visit any relatives on Dad's side? Why were there no childhood photos of him anywhere in our house? Why did he flinch whenever someone took his picture unexpectedly? And most puzzling of all, why did my mother sometimes look at him with a mixture of love and what I can only describe as profound sorrow? The revelation began with a simple brown envelope I found wedged behind a loose floorboard in Grandma's attic. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold: birth certificates, newspaper clippings, and a letter written in my grandmother's shaky handwriting that began with the words, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and it's time Sarah knew the truth about who her father really is." The man I had called Dad my entire life wasn't Robert Mitchell at all. His real name was David Kowalski, and he was a former member of a religious cult called the Children of Divine Light that operated in rural Montana during the 1970s and 80s. The newspaper clippings painted a horrific picture: mass manipulation, financial exploitation, and allegations of child abuse that eventually led to a federal investigation in 1986. According to my grandmother's letter, David had been one of the cult's inner circle members, responsible for recruiting new families and managing their finances. But when he witnessed the leader, a man named Brother Marcus, physically abusing children during a purification ceremony, something inside him broke. He tried to intervene and was brutally beaten by other cult members. That night, he escaped with nothing but the clothes on his back and a burning desire to expose what was happening. But here's where the story takes an even more shocking turn. David didn't just escape, he became a federal informant. For 2 years, he worked with the FBI, providing crucial evidence that eventually brought down the entire organization. His testimony led to Brother Marcus receiving a life sentence and saved dozens of children from continued abuse. However, his cooperation came at a terrible price: death threats from surviving cult members who had evaded prosecution. The federal marshals gave him a choice: enter witness protection with a new identity, or risk being killed by cult members seeking revenge. David chose to disappear. Robert Mitchell was born from David Kowalski's ashes, complete with a fabricated background, falsified documents, and a carefully constructed life story that would keep him safe. My grandmother's letter revealed that my mother knew everything from the beginning. They met not at a church social, but at a support group for people affected by cult activity. Mom had lost her younger brother to a different cult and was working as a volunteer counselor. When she met David, she saw a broken man trying to rebuild his life after doing something incredibly brave. She fell in love not despite his past, but because of his courage to do the right thing when it mattered most. The most devastating part of the letter was learning why they never told me the truth. 3 cult members had escaped prosecution and were believed to still be active. My parents lived in constant fear that if David's real identity was discovered, not only would he be killed, but our entire family could be targeted. They chose to carry this burden alone rather than put me at risk. But there was one final revelation that completely shattered my understanding of my own life. Among the documents was a birth certificate, not mine, but my half sister's. Her name was Rebecca Kowalski, and she had been born in the cult compound in 1982. David had a daughter with another cult member, a woman named Maria Santos, before he realized the true horror of what was happening there. When David escaped, he had to leave Rebecca behind. Maria refused to leave the cult, convinced that Brother Marcus was truly divine. In his final recorded statement to the FBI, David begged them to rescue his daughter, but by the time authorities raided the compound, Maria and Rebecca had vanished. They were believed to have fled to a sister compound in South America. For 37 years, my father had lived with the crushing guilt of abandoning his first child to save others. My mother had known about Rebecca from the beginning and had spent years helping David search for any trace of his lost daughter. They hired private investigators, monitored cult survivor networks, and never gave up hope that someday they might find her. The envelope also contained recent correspondence from a private investigator in Colombia. Rebecca had been found. Now, 41 years old, she had escaped the South American compound 15 years ago and had been searching for her father ever since. She had children of her own and had been living under an assumed name, terrified that cult members might find her. I confronted my parents, or rather, my mother and the man I now knew as David, with the evidence. The conversation that followed was the most emotionally devastating 3 hours of my life. My father broke down completely, sobbing as he told me about the nightmares that still haunted him, the children he couldn't save, and the daughter he'd been forced to abandon. My mother explained their impossible choice: tell me the truth and risk our family's safety, or carry the secret alone and protect me from a world I couldn't even imagine. She showed me a box hidden in their bedroom closet, filled with letters they'd written to me over the years, explanations they'd planned to give me if something ever happened to them, apologies for lying, and desperate attempts to make me understand why they'd chosen deception over truth. But here's what shocked me most of all. I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken for them. These two people had sacrificed their own peace of mind, their ability to live authentically, and their chance at a normal family life to protect not just me, but countless other children they'd never even met. My father hadn't just escaped a cult. He'd been a hero who'd risked everything to bring down a system of abuse. The three surviving cult members had all been arrested over the past decade for various crimes. The immediate threat was gone, which was why my grandmother had finally decided to reveal the truth. She'd been waiting for the day when it would be safe for our family to live without fear. Last month, I traveled to Colombia with my parents to meet Rebecca. The reunion was indescribable. Watching my father hold his first daughter for the first time in 37 years, seeing my mother embrace the child she'd searched for but never met, and gaining a sister I never knew existed. Rebecca brought her own children, my nephews and niece, and suddenly our small, quiet family had expanded into something beautiful and complex. We're still processing everything. Rebecca is planning to move to the United States, and we're working with therapists to help all of us navigate this incredible revelation. My father is considering writing a book about his experiences to help other cult survivors. And my mother has started volunteering with organizations that help families affected by religious extremism. I've learned that families aren't just built on blood or even truth. They're built on love, sacrifice, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs you everything. My father may have lied about his name, his past, and his history, but he never lied about loving our family. Every quiet dinner, every bedtime story, every proud smile at my graduations was authentic, even if the man giving them had to hide who he really was. The most profound realization is that I'm the daughter of a genuine hero, someone who risked his life to save children and then spent decades living in exile to protect his new family. That's not the kind of father everyone gets to have, and I'm more proud of him now than I ever was when I thought he was just an accountant. Sometimes the biggest secrets are kept not to hurt us, but to save us. And sometimes the most ordinary lives are hiding the most extraordinary stories of courage, love, and sacrifice.